What if there was a book that explained how a reader's mind works, how a reader psychologically connects with a story and with the characters in it, and explained the neuroscience underlying it all? Would you be interested? What if this book related reader psychology to the art of storytelling, explaining how to craft a story to elicit specific responses from the reader's brain? Would you read it? Well, there is a book that does exactly that and more, and today I'm going to tell you about it. Welcome to The Edge, where I explore writing, world building, and how to use AI to enhance your creativity. If that sounds like your thing, you're in the right place. Now, the book in question is The Science of Storytelling by Storr. And it's an interesting book. He uses science to understand why we are drawn to stories, what aspects of stories trigger neurological responses, why some types of stories and story structures are more effective than others, and how to tell stories that will affect your audience on a much deeper level. I tried to get a when in there, but it didn't work out, so I'll use one now. When you read this book, you're certain to have several aha moments, and the information presented is going to make you a better storyteller. Sound interesting? Well, here are a few ideas from the book to give you a taste. The human brain is a storytelling machine. Now, this concept is kind of obvious, and you already know this at least at an intuitive level. How many times have you processed an event, a bit of news, a stranger's odd sideways glance, by telling yourself a story? How often have you listened intently while a friend shared a story? Well, it's not just you. Everyone perceives the world and processes information through stories. There is an intrinsic connection between the human brain and storytelling. Our brains, you see, are hardwired to create and understand narratives. Psychologically, humans are compelled to seek and create meaning. We constantly look for patterns and connections in the world around us. This process is rooted in our evolutionary history. The stories we tell don't just entertain, they've helped us survive through the millennia. The brain's tendency to organize experiences into narratives helps us make sense of complex, often chaotic realities. This drive to create stories is not just a cultural artifact, but a cognitive necessity, a critical tool that enables us to navigate the world, to understand relationships, and to anticipate future events. Neurologically, storytelling engages multiple regions of the brain, including those responsible for language, sensory processing, and emotional response. For example, when we hear or read a story, the brain's language centers, such as the Broca's and Wernicke's areas, work to process the words, while the sensory cortex actively simulates the experiences being described. The stories we tell ourselves and others are a way of making sense of our lives, shaping our identities, and understanding our place in the world. By recognizing the brain's storytelling function, we can better understand why stories are so powerful and universal across cultures and across time. Okay, now understanding this doesn't really help you tell better stories, but it'll help you understand why stories are important and why people are drawn to them. So let's go on to some more things from this interesting book. The role of the unconscious in storytelling. The unconscious mind has a profound influence on both the creation and interpretation of stories. Psychologically, much of our thinking and even our decision making occurs unconsciously, driven by deep-seated instincts, biases, and memories. In storytelling, this means that the most powerful narratives resonate not just on a conscious level, but also tap into the unconscious mind. Neurologically, the unconscious mind operates through automatic processes, often driven by emotional and instinctual responses rather than by rational thought. When stories use symbolism, metaphor, and imagery, they can bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to these deeper layers of the psyche. Did you know the unconscious mind influences the creative process for writers? Have you ever been stuck on a scene, on a chapter ending, a character introduction, and then you sleep on it, and in the shower the next morning, you have a fully formed solution pop into your head? Don't lie to me, you dirty ape. We both know it's been months since you showered. Just messing with you. But I am serious about the unconscious mind. It's an often underappreciated facet of one's creative self. Often, the best ideas or solutions to problems emerge not through long conscious deliberation, but through moments of insight that feel almost spontaneous. This is your brain processing information unconsciously, making connections, and drawing on the vast store of your memories and experiences, even though you're not consciously thinking about whatever the problem is. So by tapping into the unconscious, storytellers create narratives that feel intuitively right and deeply resonant, even if the reasoning behind these choices isn't immediately apparent to the creator themselves. So be sure to give your brain a little downtime so your subconscious can do its job. Have you heard the term theory of mind? The basic idea here is that we build mental models of other people, and we have a theory of mind about the people we know, about our friends, our families, our pets, and even fictional characters we see or read about. We're psychologically driven to produce these models, and we use them to understand interactions, interpret body language, and predict what people will do, how they'll react in different situations. And it's important you know that your audience does this with your characters. When your characters behave in a way that is inconsistent with the mental map your audience has built, your audience will revolt. They might complain, they might lose faith in your storytelling ability, and they might just stop reading your work altogether. It is vital that you build characters in a way the audience understands so they adopt the correct theory of mind about your characters, and equally important that the character's actions, reactions, and development over time remain consistent with the character you have presented to your audience. Sure, you can subvert expectations, have a character suddenly deviate from the mental map that your readers have formed, but if you're going off-roading like that, you better nail the landing and provide a compelling and interesting reason for that character's departure from their established personality. If you don't, your audience will lose faith, lose interest, and you will have lost credibility as a storyteller. In addition, the most compelling stories are driven by characters with strong desires, flaws, and internal conflicts. The audience more easily forms a theory of mind for these kind of characters because they mirror the complexities of real human beings. This makes them relatable, it makes them engaging, it allows the audience to build a theory of mind around these fictional characters in the same way they do with real people. And that's important because that's what readers connect with. And that's not all you can do with this. You see, your characters also form a theory of mind about other characters in your story. And you can play with this. Characters who misunderstand, underestimate, and misjudge other characters make for interesting dynamics and interactions, all driven by a flawed theory of mind. And you can sell this by showing the audience these flaws, helping them to see the errors in this character's theory of mind. And that helps them to anticipate future problems that will emerge from these misunderstandings. And that is a kind of tension and curiosity that can draw readers forward through a longer work. So understanding theory of mind will strengthen your writing, helping you stay in tune with your audience, play with their expectations, and it gives you an interesting way to make your character interactions more interesting and relatable. So you're a better writer already. See that? And there's plenty more to come. The importance of change. Change is the heart of every compelling story because it reflects the way we experience life. Psychologically, humans are wired to notice and respond to changes, whether it's a shift in our environment, relationships, or our own internal states. This attentiveness to change, it's a survival mechanism. Our ancestors needed this to detect changes in their surroundings, to avoid threats, and to seize opportunities. Neurologically, change activates the brain's reward system. When a story introduces a significant change, such as a plot twist, a major revelation, a character's transformation, or a dramatic shift in circumstances, in the audience, it triggers the release of dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation. That's right, you as a storyteller can literally change the brain chemistry of your audience. Oh, the power, the sweet, sweet power. Don't let it go to your head. Keep this in mind when crafting a story. Use change, new information, twists, thwarted objectives, new threats, opportunities for romance. Use all of it to keep your audience engaged. Never let a scene pass without something changing. Never let your story grow stagnant. Keep stimulating your reader's mushy little brain with taste after little taste of dopamine. You don't have to mimic the brain-numbing overstimulation of TikTok, but you do have to keep things moving or you will lose your audience. And it's not just good storytelling, it's neuropsychology at its finest. Wow, now you're an even better storyteller. Shall we do another one? The role of conflict. Now, conflict in storytelling is not just a narrative device, it's a psychological necessity. The human brain is wired to focus on problems and challenges. It's an evolutionary trait that has helped us survive. Neurologically, conflict triggers the release of stress hormones like cortisol. These hormones heighten attention and focus. And it works whether the stimulus is a stranger approaching you in a dark parking lot or rising conflict and surprises in a story. This is why stories with conflict are inherently more engaging. They tap into our survival instincts. They change our brain chemistry. And it's not only that. You see, different types of conflict, internal, external, and interpersonal, these activate different areas of the brain. For example, internal conflicts, someone struggling with a moral choice, for example, this engages the prefrontal cortex. It's responsible for decision making and moral reasoning. While external conflicts, action scenes, external dangers, these trigger the amygdala, the brain's emotion center. That means you, as the storyteller, would do well to present your audience with a range of conflicts, a variety of internal, external, interpersonal conflicts to stimulate and excite different parts of your reader's brain. And this is also why stories that rely exclusively on one type of conflict tend to fall flat and feel dull, even if the conflict itself is completely over the top. Because after a while, the part of the brain engaging with that type of conflict, it becomes tired. The audience seeing this, they just disengage. The solution is not to ratchet up that axis of conflict, rather it's to introduce another axis altogether. That's why action scenes are more powerful when the characters struggle with internal conflict, moral dilemmas, and interpersonal issues rather than just more action. And this lesson is one few Hollywood writers seem to understand. That's why movies and TV shows are actually becoming duller and less engaging. It's not that the audience is more jaded. It's not that we need to see bigger action set pieces to feel stimulated. It's not that we need more special effects. It's that the writers and directors they're hiring just aren't very good at storytelling. They don't know how to present multiple axes of conflict. Most action movies are just action with no meaningful internal or interpersonal conflict. Most romances are just two hot people butting heads with no meaningful moral questions or external conflict to amplify the story. But the ones that do really well have all those things. They're complex, they're multi-layers, they have conflict on a lot of different axes. They stimulate multiple parts of the audience's brain. Instead, they're focusing on single axes of conflict, which quickly bore audiences even while they throw in more and more meaningless spectacle and ever larger budgets without fixing the shortcomings of the stories themselves. A shitty script is going to make a shitty show no matter how much money you throw at it. They need to find better writers who know how to do this. And this problem is leading to flop after expensive flop. Why can't they figure this out? It's really not that difficult. Write better stories, that'll produce better shows and movies. Put me in charge of a studio. Seriously, I'll turn it around in 24 months, probably less, because I can tell the difference between a good story and a shit story. And the people making them can't seem to tell the difference. I don't know why. It's not that hard. Anyway, you still with me? See what I mean about this being a great book? I'm barely touching the tip of the iceberg, and your storytelling is 3.1459 times better than it was before you watched this video. My voice hasn't cracked yet, so let's do one more. Let's talk about the power of structure. Structure in storytelling is not arbitrary. It reflects the way our brains process and understand information. Certain narrative structures, like the three-act structure or the hero's journey, these align with the brain's need for order and predictability. These structures provide a framework that helps the audience anticipate and understand unfolding events. It satisfies the brain's craving for patterns and meaning. From a neurological perspective, the brain is constantly trying to predict what will happen next based on past experiences. A well-structured story meets this need by setting up expectations and then fulfilling them in a surprising yet satisfying way, which in turn triggers the release of dopamine, that neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. So as a storyteller, using a structure your audience understands dramatically increases their engagement and enjoyment. Now, I know this sounds weird. It sounds boring. But the thing is, familiar structures and patterns are both more comfortable and, this is not intuitive, but it's more stimulating for your audience. And don't look at me like that. It's not witchcraft, it's science. But I know you're struggling with this concept, so here's the thing. If you don't like coloring between the lines, that's okay, but you need to show your audience a pattern. You need to give them a structure to latch onto, even if it's a novel structure that you've made up for this one work of fiction. Look at stories like Pulp Fiction or Memento. They don't follow traditional narrative structures, but they frame the narratives in a way that gives the audience a pattern to lock onto, a structure that keeps them oriented and makes the experience satisfying rather than confusing and frustrating. And maybe Memento wasn't a great example. It certainly confused my mom, and I think it's confused some other people out there, but the structure worked for most of us. Anyway, why is this? Why do audiences respond better to familiar patterns? Well, looking into cognitive psychology, we find the study of schema theory. This is a branch of cognitive science that studies how the brain organizes knowledge. Now, schema theory suggests that our brains use mental frameworks, called schemas, to process new information. So as things are coming in, your brain's cataloging it, categorizing it, and trying to fit it against patterns it already knows. And in storytelling, these schemas are activated when they recognize familiar structures or patterns, such as the rise and fall of the three-act story or the cyclical nature of the hero's journey. And this recognition allows the audience to process the story more easily, allowing them to focus their cognitive resources, which are finite, on the emotional and thematic content rather than using all their brain power just trying to understand the crazy narrative flow of some structure that you just pulled out of your ass. So it's better to use established structure. See, I told you this was science. Now you're 4.2 times the storyteller you were before watching this video. The science of storytelling is information dense. The bits I shared with you are just a little taste. I really can't recommend this book enough, but I did leave a link in the description. If you want, grab a copy. Now get out there and write, you apes.